Hi, my name is Amy Toth. I'm a professor in two departments in EEOB, Ecology, Evolution, and Organismal Biology, and Entomology at Iowa State University. I am the principal investigator of a lab that investigates the biology of bees and wasps. So we're out here today to tell you about a project that we're working on. We're really interested in how to improve the health of pollinators in agroecosystems such as Iowa. And there's a lot of research out there that has been suggesting that agricultural intensification has some negative impacts on bees. And so what we've been doing is looking at prairie strips as one way to possibly help bolster the health and populations of both wild and managed bees such as honeybees. So we've been doing research for several years now, looking at both wild bee communities, their interactions with plants, and then also looking at honeybee health in the context of prairie strips. And the results so far are very promising. We've been finding a lot of evidence that honeybee colonies, managed honeybee colonies that we place on prairie strips, actually gain more weight and have improved access to floral resources, so more pollen and nectar available to them, especially in the late season, right around now. After the soybeans cease to bloom and the clover ceases to bloom as well. And then there's also previous research from other folks at Iowa State that has shown clear benefits to wild bee populations as well. We have actually looked at full-size restored prairies and found large benefits to both honeybees and wild bees as well. And so one question that we had was, when you look at a prairie strip, which is a much more limited area, is that also going to provide benefits? And it clearly does. And in fact, for the honeybees, the mix of both soybean agriculture and prairie seems to actually be good, because it's providing both the soybean nectar earlier in the season and then the forage that the prairies provide later in the season. Goldenrod this time of year is actually one of the really important resources. So one of the things that we've found to be really important in our previous research is that at the end of the season, a lot of the weedy species and of course the crop species are no longer flowering. And at that time, a lot of the pollinators are suffering from a lack of forage. And we see that in terms of honeybees. They actually get very aggressive and try to rob each other's colonies because there's no forage out there. Things like goldenrod out there blooming late in the season on prairies actually provide a huge floral resource at a critical time period in the season when they don't have a lot of other options to forage on. One of the other things that we're really interested in is understanding the relationships between native wild bees and managed bees. And so honeybees are not native, and they're of course important for agriculture as pollinators and also for production of honey, but they also can have negative impacts on wild bees in terms of competing for floral resources, but also they have a lot of diseases. And those diseases in some cases can jump over and infect wild bees. So another project that we've been looking at in the context of prairie strips is looking at whether diseases from honeybees that we place on prairie strips actually can jump over to the wild bees. And so far we're finding evidence that they can jump over, but we're not sure if that actually has any negative impacts yet. The diseases are present, but we're not seeing a lot of sick bees. We're not seeing a lot of declines in those bee populations, but that's something that we need to look more at in the future, and that's something that we're actively working on.
Hi, I'm Kate Borchardt. I'm a PhD candidate studying wild bee conservation and plant pollinator networks, and I am working on this project with Dr. Amy Toth on the native bee side, looking to see how well prairie strips support wild bee communities with the presence of honeybee apiaries, and whether we can both produce honey and conserve wild bees at the same time. So we go out into the prairie strips and we net collect wild bee specimens, bring them back into lab, and analyze the pollen that is on them so we can figure out what plant species these native bee species are visiting in the prairie strips, as well as look at their health and how stressed out they are in different environments, different prairie strips with or without honeybees. It's important to have wild bee species because honeybees are exotic, so they're not actually from North America. And so these wild bee species are what the native plants rely on in order to reproduce and produce seeds, and seed production maintains the plant community, so these prairie strips can have the same plant species year after year over the long term. We have found up to 90 different species in the prairie strips, and compared to agricultural fields without any prairie strip plantings, we find maybe like 20 species, and they're the most common species. So prairie strips are conserving more rare and wild bee species in need of conservation. There's this one leaf cutting bee that so they build nests out of leaves, and the males have these really enlarged front legs, and so they look like little lobsters running around, and those are only found in the prairie strips. Well, we find a lot of bumblebees too, which are another social species that is native to North America, and those are very important for many different plant species, especially maybe pollinating agricultural crops in the absence of honeybee colonies. This year we've captured about 1,700 bees, which is quite a lot for this kind of project, showing just how many bees there are in prairie strips. And so we'll use those bees to kind of analyze their diversity and the health of different species in these environments. In the broader scope, I hope that my research shows that even in this highly agricultural landscape of Iowa, we can conserve wild bee species in these agricultural fields, and we can apply this to other regions of the country and the world in order to conserve wild bee species better.
My name is Randall Cass. I am the Bee Extension Specialist at Iowa State. And right now we're out visiting some of our colonies, some of our beehives that are here at a prairie strip site. So I'm just going to be giving a light inspection and talking a little bit about our research that we're doing here in the prairie strip. So I like to smoke them at first, sort of like ringing the front doorbell. You're letting them know, hey, I'm about to do an inspection. And that way you won't catch them off guard whenever you crack the lid. So we don't have too many bees here up top, so I'm going to go down to the next deep. These all started out in just one box at the bottom, and so that's what we call these larger boxes deeps, these smaller boxes supers. All these colonies started out as one deep at the beginning of the season. We got them as package bees. So what a package of bees is a box of about 20 or 30,000 bees and one queen. But there's no frames in there. There's none of this drawn out wax for the queen to lay eggs in, or for the bees to store nectar in or pollen. And so when it's just a package, they kind of start out at a disadvantage because they pretty much have to start from scratch, getting started, drawing out comb, that sort of thing. So initially all these colonies were pretty small. But as you can see at the prairie strip site, most of them, all of them have at least a second deep, if not third deep, fourth deep on top. So it seems like the prairie strip sites our prairie strip sites have been a good place for the bees to grow and grow really rapidly, a lot larger than we expected from package bees at the beginning. Let's hope they stay that way. So right now I'm loosening up these frames. Each one of these deeps has 10 frames of comb in it. And in the comb, that's where bees store nectar, they store pollen for food, and that's also where the queen lays her eggs. So hopefully I can find you some food frames, some brood frames, show you how well they're doing. So there you can hopefully see in the camera, the glimmer, this is a colony that's collecting a lot of nectar that can eventually be turned into honey. Can you see me okay? Mm-hmm. So here we've got capped honey. That's ready to go. I can actually stick my hive tool in there, and I could eat some of that if I wanted to. And over here we've got these shiny cells. It's nectar, and so that is soon to be honey. Down there it looks like we got a queen cell that they're building, which means that they might be trying to produce a new queen, which is not necessarily something we want right now. So last year was our first year selling Iowa State University honey, and it was a huge success. We sold out before, we started sales in September, October, and we sold out before December, before Christmas time. So this year we expanded our apiary production. We have 20 colonies that are located at the Hort Farm, the Horticulture Research Station. And then we had 24 colonies that we collected honey from at Prairie strip sites. So what we'll be doing, all in all, we're collecting close to 1,500 pounds of honey this year, compared to the 600 or 700 pounds that we had last year. So that's fantastic. And we're also going to be selling two different varieties of honey. We're going to be selling our classic Iowa State University honey, as well as Prairie strips honey. So that's a venture that we're really excited about, and we're hoping to see that people are interested in purchasing honey from colonies that were kept at Prairie strips. It also presents a unique opportunity for commercial beekeepers. The reason in past research, we had placed honeybee colonies at Prairie strip sites, but only in groups of 4 colonies. And we saw that when compared to control sites where there were no Prairie strips present, the honeybee colonies that were placed at Prairie strip sites did very well. They gained more mass, they collected more nectar, they had more honey at the end of the year. So when we presented this to commercial beekeepers saying, hey, whenever you're looking for a site to keep your bees during the summer, why don't you consider Prairie strips? And at first they were a little bit suspicious. They said, you've only got 4 colonies in your data set. We usually keep 25 to 50 colonies at a site. So if you can show us that they can thrive at the Prairie strips, maybe we can talk. And so this year we upped the number of colonies that we have to 20 colonies at each site. And so far so good. These colonies are doing better than our colonies at the Horticulture Research Station. And there could be a lot of factors underlying that. But I think that one of the major factors that's contributing to our colonies growing and our colonies collecting so much nectar for honey is the fact that they're at a Prairie strip site. Now, one thing a lot of people don't realize is that honeybees aren't native. They were brought over by Europeans. So we actually have between 300 and 400 species of native bee here in Iowa. But honeybees are not one of them. We developed this project this summer because we wanted to look at the diversity and abundance of native bee species in prairie strips, but we also wanted to see if placing honeybee colonies, up to 20 honeybee colonies at this site, if that maybe had a negative impact on the diversity and abundance of native bee species. Because honeybees, although we lose them at faster rates due to pesticide exposure, parasites like the varroa mite that can really weaken a colony, and poor forage availability. Those are all factors that affect our honeybees and cause us to lose colonies every year. But we can always order new bees. You can think of bees almost like livestock. We have some control over the number of colonies we have. We can split new colonies. We can rear new queens. So if I'm a beekeeper and I have 50 hives and I lose 25 of them this year, I can purchase 25 new ones next year. But when it comes to native bees, we can't do that. We can't rear new native bee queens. Most of them are solitary. They don't live in colonies like this. And so protecting native species is important. So that's why we were excited to have this be a part of the experiment this summer to see can we recommend that beekeepers, commercial beekeepers, keep their colonies at prairie strips? And can we guarantee them that that's not going to hurt the diversity and abundance of native bee species that are active in those strips? We are harvesting prairie strips honey this year, and to make sure that that's a proper name to give that honey, we've been collecting samples of nectar throughout the summer, and we're going to be sending that to a lab to be analyzed for pollen content. So that way we can guarantee folks that hey, the pollen that you're going to be finding, the flowers that these bees were visiting, were in the prairie strips. So that'll be exciting to see those results. See exactly where our bees were foraging this summer, where they were collecting all that nectar, and why they got so big, because they got really big this summer. We had very healthy, strong, happy colonies in the prairie strips. The proceeds that come from the honey sales go back to funding our honey apiary, purchasing equipment, extraction, bottling, all sorts of things like that. So the funds all go back to trying to make our honey apiary self-sufficient. Right now we're in year 2, it's still a building year, but we're hoping to expand and get bigger and get more honey out there. Okay, so I'm standing here at one of our prairie strip sites where we conducted our research this summer. Our 20 honeybee colonies are at the field edge, but right now we're standing in the prairie strips that run down the center of the field. For our project this summer, we had our summer workers walk transects through the prairie strips. Using their nets, they collected different native species of bee that they were able to ID, and they also ID'd different plant species that were present at each prairie strip site. All in all, they collected several hundred species of bee and identified many types of plants. This time of year, there's not a lot of plants blooming in Iowa, not a lot of native plants blooming in Iowa, even in our prairie strips, but we do have this species of goldenrod here that's still flowering, and we've been able to see a couple of honeybees buzzing around, but we haven't yet been able to see any of our native bee species that we have. So in addition to the abundance of benefits that prairie strips bring to farmers, another one is our research is showing that prairie strips provide a good habitat for native bee species. They potentially provide a great space for commercial beekeepers to leave their colonies, and that opens up a few more things for farmers. First of all, it opens up the possibility of connecting with local beekeepers to have them on your land, potentially getting some honey out of it, that sort of thing. Also, logically, although soybean doesn't require pollination, logically it could benefit from having bees in the field collecting nectar and pollinating soybean flowers. Our research has shown that when soybean is blooming, our honeybee colonies increase in mass. And so that's telling us that the honeybees are visiting soybean flowers, which could provide a potential yield boost to farmers, although more research would be required to back that idea up. If folks are interested in honeybees or starting to keep bees themselves, we have a great website that's relatively new for the Iowa State Bee Program. That's bees.cals.iastate.edu. So that's a great place where people can find how-to videos on how to get started beekeeping, what to do if they find a swarm in their backyard, extra info on bumblebees, and then information about where to buy our honey that we'll be selling later this year. And if folks are interested in learning more about strips, the Prairie Strips program at Iowa State University has a robust website with plenty of information on implementing, on how to apply for CRP in order to get funds to cover prairie strips, as well as how to maintain the prairie strips.